When people imagine surviving a zombie apocalypse, they picture themselves as natural leaders, resourceful wanderers, or fearless fighters. But the truth is that most wouldn't fall because zombies are unstoppable. They'd fall because of predictable, preventable mistakes. The real danger isn't the undead. It's the choices people make when fear takes over. The first major mistake is assuming the crisis is temporary. In the early hours of an outbreak, denial becomes a silent killer. People convince themselves that authorities will fix everything, that the chaos is just a momentary disaster. They stay indoors, glued to the news, treating the unfolding collapse like a storm that will pass. But every minute spent waiting is a minute the world becomes harder to navigate. Supplies vanish, roads fill with abandoned vehicles, and safe exits disappear. Survival favors those who act quickly, not those who cling to normalcy. The longer someone hesitates, the more the world closes in around them. The next mistake is running without a plan. Once denial breaks, people often swing into blind panic. They rush into the streets with no supplies, no destination, and no idea what dangers lie ahead. They leave simply because staying feels terrifying, not because they know where they're going. But wandering without purpose is one of the fastest ways to become stranded or surrounded. A survivor needs even a basic plan: where water can be found, which routes are safest, which areas to avoid, where shelter might exist. A plan provides direction, but just as importantly, it reduces noise and confusion. Blind movement draws attention. Intentional movement keeps you alive. These early mistakes, hesitation followed by chaos, set the stage for everything that goes wrong afterward. And most people don't realize how quickly those first decisions determine their fate. People rarely understand how quickly desperation destroys judgment in a world overrun by the dead. And one of the most catastrophic mistakes is trusting the wrong people. In an apocalypse, danger doesn't just come from the infected. It comes from the living who are scared, hungry, or willing to sacrifice others for their own survival. Many people get themselves killed because they cling to the idea that everyone still has the same morals and intentions they had before society collapsed. They want to believe that humanity naturally pulls together in crisis. But fear changes people. Some become reckless, some become unpredictable, and some turn violent the moment resources run thin. Trust becomes something that must be earned, not given freely. Approaching strangers without caution, revealing where your supplies are, or letting someone into your shelter because they seem nice is the kind of optimism that gets entire groups wiped out. Every survivor has a reason for their behavior, and not all those reasons are noble. The smart approach is measured trust, listening more than talking, watching actions more than promises, and never assuming someone's desperation makes them harmless. A wrong alliance can be more deadly than a horde of zombies because betrayal hits when you're least prepared. Another devastating mistake is staying in densely populated areas. Cities are comfortable when the world is normal, full of food, stores, shelter, and people who can help. But during a zombie apocalypse, population density becomes the enemy. Every building, subway, and alley hides potential threats. Every corner represents a place where the infected can gather unseen. And every loud noise snowballs into chaos because panic spreads faster than logic. Many people make the mistake of clinging to their homes or apartments, thinking they're safer surrounded by familiar places. But cities become death traps almost immediately. Supplies dry up quickly, zombies cluster tightly, and escape routes become clogged with terrified crowds. Leaving a city early isn't running away. It's survival strategy. The further you move from dense clusters of people, the fewer infected you'll encounter. It's not about finding the perfect rural paradise. It's about reducing the number of things that can go wrong. But countless people stay too long, convinced that the comfort of their home outweighs the risk outside. By the time they realize the streets are no longer navigable, it's often too late. The exits are blocked, communication is cut, and the infection spreads faster than any evacuation route can handle. Another life-ending mistake is overestimating personal bravery. Many people imagine they will be heroic, charging into dangerous situations, rescuing strangers, or standing their ground in dramatic standoffs. But courage without strategy is just another form of recklessness. Running toward screams, fighting when escape is available, or taking unnecessary risks just to feel strong is the kind of behavior that gets people cornered or bitten. Fear is natural, but bravado is deadly. Survival isn't about being fearless. It's about knowing when to stay quiet, when to hide, and when to avoid danger altogether. The people who survive longest aren't always the strongest or the boldest. They're the ones who know how to measure their risks and pick their battles. Another fatal error is wasting energy and supplies. In a crisis, people panic and use resources like they're still living in normal times. They overeat, burn fuel unnecessarily, waste ammunition on non-threats, or carry gear they don't need. Every calorie matters. Every drop of water matters. Every bullet matters. And yet many people burn through their resources in the first few days because they're used to convenience. They assume they can always find more somewhere else. But in a world where supply chains collapse overnight, every piece of equipment becomes precious. Survivors who don't learn to ration quickly find themselves weakened, dehydrated, or unarmed. And once you're depleted, you become slow, careless, and easy prey. A related mistake is overloading with supplies in the wrong way. Some people pack too much, turning themselves into slow, noisy targets weighed down by items they'll never use. Others pack too lightly, bringing only sentimental objects or things that offer comfort rather than utility. Survival isn't about comfort. It's about choosing what keeps you alive. Excess weight drains stamina. Missing essentials dooms you when conditions shift. The balance between being prepared and being mobile is delicate, and many people fail because they chase one extreme or the other. One of the most overlooked mistakes is improper noise control. Noise becomes a beacon in a world full of creatures drawn to sound. People slam car doors, shout to one another, stomp through debris, or fire weapons without need. Each careless sound sends a signal far beyond what they can see. Even small noises compound over time, attracting groups of infected or alerting hostile survivors. Those who survive longest act like the world is always listening, because it is. These mistakes build on one another, creating a cascading effect. Trusting the wrong person leads to bad alliances. Staying in cities leads to unavoidable conflict. Wasting supplies leads to desperate decisions. And noise, bravery, and planning all intertwine into a single truth. The apocalypse punishes carelessness instantly. The people who thrive aren't superheroes or action movie stars. They're the ones who understand that survival isn't dramatic. It's quiet, cautious, disciplined, and deliberate. One of the most disastrous mistakes people make in a zombie apocalypse is refusing to adapt. Humans cling to routine by instinct. They want to follow the same habits they relied on before the world unraveled. Sleeping at the same hours, cooking meals the same way, traveling the same familiar paths. But old patterns become dangerous when the rules of the world have changed. The undead don't follow schedules, and neither do the desperate survivors who roam the ruins. Anyone stuck in their old rhythm becomes predictable, and predictability is a weakness that enemies quickly exploit. The strongest survivors are the ones who can shift their mindset instantly, who understand that comfort is no longer a privilege but a threat, and that the world now demands creativity, flexibility, and constant reevaluation. Another fatal error is neglecting basic maintenance of equipment and shelter. People assume their knife will stay sharp forever, their shelter will hold indefinitely, their flashlight will keep shining, or their boots won't wear down. But in a world where no stores remain open, everything decays faster than expected. A dull blade takes more force, making noise and increasing the chance of injury. A weak shelter wall collapses during stress, letting threats inside at the worst possible moment. Batteries drain, fabrics tear, and gear fails exactly when it's needed most. Survivors who don't perform constant upkeep find themselves betrayed by the very tools they rely on, and when equipment fails in an apocalypse, the consequences are immediate and often final. Another major mistake is ignoring minor injuries. A small cut, a sprained ankle, or a fever might seem like an inconvenience in normal life, but in a zombie-infested world, it can spiral into catastrophe. A wound that gets infected slows you down, makes you weaker, affects your judgment, and can turn a simple escape into a life or death struggle. People often push through pain, assuming they can deal with it later, not realizing that later may never come. Fatigue compounds, illness spreads, injuries limit mobility, and mobility is everything. Survivors who don't listen to their bodies end up trapped, overwhelmed, or forced to rely on others at the worst possible moment. A deeply underestimated mistake is underestimating boredom and mental fatigue. People imagine the apocalypse as nonstop chaos, but the truth is that survival involves long stretches of silence, waiting, and uncertainty. That quiet eats at the mind. Loneliness makes people careless. Isolation turns small fears into overwhelming anxiety. Some start taking dangerous risks just to feel alive again. Others become paranoid and mistrustful, pushing away the very allies who could help them survive. The apocalypse doesn't break everyone through direct danger. Many fall because their minds unravel long before their bodies fail. Maintaining mental resilience, finding purpose, and staying grounded becomes as important as any weapon or ration. Overconfidence is another silent killer. After surviving the first few days or weeks, many people start believing they've mastered the new world. They've escaped a few encounters, avoided a few threats, taken down a few stragglers, so they assume they're invincible. That mindset leads to pushing boundaries, taking unnecessary risks, and losing the caution that kept them alive in the first place. Overconfidence turns survivors into loud footsteps in quiet places, into wanderers who stray from safe routes, into challengers of threats they should have avoided. The apocalypse rewards humility and punishes arrogance without hesitation. Perhaps the worst mistake of all is losing sight of long-term survival. Most people focus only on the immediate moment, finding food today, staying hidden today, surviving tonight. But short-term thinking eventually collapses. Food runs out, weather changes, seasons shift, groups splinter. Without planning for tomorrow, the day after, and the next month, survivors eventually face a crisis they are unprepared for. The people who endure are always thinking ahead: how to preserve resources, how to build sustainable shelter, how to cultivate small food sources, how to adapt when winter comes, how to avoid repeating the cycle of panic and scarcity. The zombie apocalypse punishes those who treat it like an action movie, like a temporary event, or like something they can outrun with luck alone. Survival requires more than bravery. It requires patience, awareness, humility, strategic thinking, adaptability, and the ability to learn from mistakes before they happen. The undead are dangerous, but the deadliest enemy is always human error. Surviving a zombie apocalypse isn't about being perfect. It's about recognizing how easily simple mistakes turn into final ones. When the world changes overnight, every decision carries weight. Every choice shapes the next hour, the next day, the next chance at staying alive. And the truth is, the apocalypse doesn't care about intention. It only cares about outcomes. People fall not because they were weak, but because they relied on instincts shaped by a world that no longer exists. The final lesson is understanding that survival is a mindset. It's not built on fear, but on awareness. Not on aggression, but on control. Not on luck, but on preparation. The survivors who endure are the ones who can face the collapse of everything familiar and still think clearly. They learn. They adapt. They question their impulses. They make the hard decisions early, before desperation forces them into a corner. A zombie apocalypse strips away the noise of modern life and leaves a simple truth behind. Mistakes are the real monsters. A moment of hesitation, a burst of reckless courage, a misplaced trust, or a careless noise can undo days of careful planning. But those who survive understand that every moment is an opportunity to avoid repeating the errors that claimed others before them. In the end, the apocalypse reveals something important. Survival isn't granted to the strongest or the fastest. It goes to the ones who understand the world for what it has become and refuse to pretend it's anything else. It goes to those who learn from every misstep. It goes to those who acknowledge danger without letting it control them. It goes to those who know that every choice matters, because in a world filled with the undead, the smallest mistake is often the last.